So today's speaker is Randall, CompTIA's Randall Edwards. There's really no one better to tell us about how the Network Plus certification is evolving. He was just telling us how he helped develop some of the questions and all the behind the scenes stuff there. So he actually manages the CompTIA infrastructure certification portfolio that include A+, Network Plus, Server Plus, Linux Plus, Cloud Plus, and IT Fundamentals Plus. He directed the development and implementation of CompTIA's performance-based items, and he's been involved in creating technical assessments in academia and the industry. And he has over 15 years experience creating products in the education technology space. So really excited to have him with us today. Just a quick overview so everyone knows what to expect. We're going to talk a little bit about the Network Plus overview, what it is, talk about the CompTIA career path and how Network Plus fits in there. Then we're going to spend a bit of time going through the actual Network Plus exam changes and what to expect in the Network Plus. And then we have some CompTIA trainee resources that we'll talk about how you can actually train, and we're actually giving away a year of Infosec skills to one lucky attendee today. So stay tuned to the end and maybe you'll be selected to get that year of free training, which includes, all the CompTIA different certifications as well as, hundreds of other courses. And then we'll have our Q&A as well. So last thing before we jump in, here's our free resources. As I mentioned, you can find these in the related content tab. We have 3 flyers here. We have our Breaking into Cybersecurity flyer that covers the 3 CompTIA certifications, A+, Network Plus, Security Plus. We have some use cases of organizations like Vets in Tech, where they, basically use these 3 certifications as like a model to train veterans and their spouses to help them break into cybersecurity. And then we have the CompTIA Career Pathway flyer, which Randall's going to talk a little bit about that later. And lastly, we have the full Network Plus certification exam objectives if you want to see, all the nitty-gritty details there. So last thing before we jump into the presentation, we have a poll here on the screen. Would appreciate if everyone just takes a second here to let us know, what kind of certifications you have, where you're at in your career. I think this will help Randall as we talk about the Network Plus to really help frame the discussion. So, if you have any of these existing, CompTIA certifications like ITF Plus or A Plus or Security Plus, or if you have any other of these certifications listed here, feel free to go ahead and let us know. And you can also, as I mentioned, drop questions in directly if you have any specific questions. But yeah, while we wait for some responses to come in, Randall, curious, what you expect to see here. Do you find that the Network Plus is like the first certification a lot of people get, or do people generally have other certifications before they get the Network Plus?
Good question. And also for everybody on the webinar right now, if we're not going to be disappointed if you have non-CompTIA certifications here. Please just toss in whatever you have. And if you don't have any, this is actually in many ways a really great place to start. To that question, Jeff, I often see individuals starting with either ITF Plus or A Plus, and then moving on to Network Plus and then into the security areas. Network Plus is a really interesting certification, and I'll speak to this a little bit more about how it kind of aligns with some of the more vendor-specific certifications you have there, like CCNA, for example. But, I often see that Network Plus is advanced end users will perhaps start out with Network Plus, but individuals who really don't have any background, say beyond just kind of like, setting stuff up on your phone, will often start with ITF or A Plus before they go this direction. So I'm interested to see how it turned out here. It looks like we've got about half the people answering. So what do they say?
All right, let's go ahead and take. Oh, interesting. Yeah, a lot of people have nearly 40% don't have any certifications, and yeah, it's interesting that 25% have their Security Plus and their A Plus.
And so I look at our data, and this is maybe good to talk about before we go into, what's new about Network Plus, what is Network Plus, that we have hundreds of thousands of individuals who have our certifications, and many of them go to Security Plus or A Plus kind of 1-2, and Network Plus is really a technical hands-on certification exam. A lot of the stuff that you're doing with Security Plus, that kind of entry-level security analyst position, so to speak, you're not necessarily doing IP addressing or running subnets. You understand what those are, but it's not the technical hands-on. So we actually see a lot of people go from Security Plus to Network Plus because Network Plus then gives them the hands-on technical expertise to be able to kind of step up that next step and really make those move towards, being penetration tester, being a higher level security analyst.
Yeah, very interesting. Now we'll go ahead and jump into the actual presentation here that everyone's here for, and I'll kick it over to you, Randall, to take over with the Network Plus overview and let us know all about it.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm really happy to be on this webinar today. I want to say thank you, Jeff, to you and to Infosec for everything you do that really kind of advancing the security mindset and the way that we need these security professionals to be in industry. So today what I'd like to do is speak about Network Plus a bit. I hope that's right. So I've been invited here to do. Network Plus launches today, the new 008 refresh. For those of you that aren't too familiar with the way that the CompTIA certifications work, most of the certifications we put a new version out every 3 years. And the reasons for this are manifold, but primarily we know that technology changes very quickly. So we put new sets of objectives out there pretty much as quickly as we're able to develop them. We have about a 2-year development timeline. So with 3 years, that really just gives us a year to have the new one out there, a couple years to develop, and we launch the next. So we have the 007, which will be available for a handful of months longer. But if you really want to get those cutting edge technologies, those new technologies, and understand where networking is going, and networking really being one of the key components of moving into security or moving into infrastructure, it's one of those building blocks. Network Plus will help you do that. So I've got a high level view of what is Network Plus. And then I'm going to go through down into the actual objectives themselves, talk about those a little bit. And I'd like to make this more of an interactive presentation as much as possible with those of you on mute, there in the background. If you have questions, if something I say brings a question to mind, type it in the Q&A. You can type it in the chat, and we will do our best to answer that. So I'm just not kind of, speaking into the void and telling you what I think you might want to know. I want to know, what do you actually want to learn from this while you've got me here? So starting with Network Plus, really the new refresh of Network Plus looks at what does the individual need that is working on these networks, who's taking the network from the ISP and getting it to the end user, that what we call the last mile, right? What do you need to know if you're that person who's charged with making sure what is coming into a building or coming into a Soho office or coming into somebody's house? How do we make sure it's set up, deployed, secure, and maintained? And that might sound like a lot of cabling, a lot of IP addressing, a lot of routing and subnetting. Sure, it is. You need to know how to get a reservation on the DHCP, but you also need to know how to do things like logging and monitoring. We're seeing a lot of the skills that are the security mindset skills work their way into networking because things are getting optimized and things are getting automated. And we're refreshing the objectives so that the individuals who have this new certification are able to do that. So, if you just look at the screen here, you kind of see the high-level stuff. It's a technical hands-on certification program where you're able to establish, maintain, and troubleshoot networks. Secondly, it's not quite like other vendor-specific network certs that might look at a particular solution. And so CompTIA, we're not-for-profit. We partner with, Microsoft, Amazon. We even partner with Cisco on some things. There are definitely places for those vendor-specific certifications. I think what Network Plus does is it lets you speak the language of networking. It makes sure that you know what the solution is going to be, regardless of what shop you're working in. And it's really a kind of certification that will make sure if you're put down anywhere, if you're going, if you're a field tech and you're going from site to site to site, you're not going to encounter something that surprises you. You're always going to be ready for it. So let's talk about who is Network Plus good for? Who might want to use this? And we look at the job roles there, and you see a bunch of them listed. The primary one is really this kind of junior network administrator. This is just another name for a type of system system administrator or sysadmin. And I've been told this, and I like to repeat this. A+ is kind of where you get your first job in tech, but Network Plus is where you get your career. It's kind of where you go from being at the help desk to really having a role in creating and deploying systems. And creating and deploying systems, whether that's cloud, whether that's from the security side, whether that is from even like the penetration testing side and auditing, is really the bread and butter and the basis of what IT and IT infrastructure is. So you can see all those job roles there, and within any of these job roles, really Network Plus is going directly to the core of what those individuals do. Jeff, you asked me earlier, we see some of these people that might not have a certification. They might have a different certification. How does Network Plus work for them? And you can see with the recommended experience here, we're suggesting that people have 1 to 2 years total IT experience. And that might be at the help desk. That might be, working in a small business or a mom and pop shop where you're setting up the printer and you're doing the POTS phone. And you've done that for a year, and you kind of understand how things work. You know how to image a system. You know how to print something, or basically to troubleshoot a printer, but you're not quite sure how to deploy the network that gets that printer up and working, and that's what Network Plus is going to help you to do. We have these kind of A+ certified individuals are ideal, and those wanting to move to Security Plus. We have a pathway, and I think I get to it in a few moments here, and I'll talk about it more when we get there. But some people go A+ Network Plus Server Plus. A+ Network Plus Security Plus, and it's not always the right path. It's basically, do you have that 1 to 2 years of experience that kind of puts you in the area where you know what's going on and you want to take that next step in advancing your career?
Yeah, I wanted to actually ask you a
please.
question about that, if you don't mind, because a lot of we have our podcast, and we interact with a lot of students, and a lot of them, maybe they haven't had that first job yet, and I know a lot of people are really eager to, dive right in and take the Network Plus. So, do you have any advice maybe for those folks who maybe they don't have that 1 to 2 years experience, but they're just really eager and want to jump right in? Is that a good idea for them, or do you have any sort of advice along those lines?
Yeah, it's different for everyone. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, but let's take a few different types of individuals, right? So if you're that individual, and I suspect this isn't most of the people on the webinar today, but if you're that individual who's like just out of high school and you're looking to get into your first thing, I suggest job boards, internships, and whatnot. But if you're perhaps a returning veteran, and we work with a lot of returning veterans, if you're someone who's a career changer and you've decided, what I've been doing isn't fulfilling, and we're seeing so much of this with the COVID pandemic, people deciding that, they're reassessing what's important. If you've decided, hey, I've worked as kind of like a sales rep on the floor at Macy's, for example. I was at Macy's the other day and met somebody and was talking to them, and they're like, hey, what do you do? I was like, oh, I work at CompTIA. And they're like, oh, CompTIA, that's the place that does A+, right? Yeah, that's the place that does A+. Why do you ask? And it turns out that this individual, she was thinking about taking A+ because she wanted to do a career change. And what she said to me was exactly what you asked, Jeff. She's like, I don't have any experience in IT. I don't know how I'm going to get a job. And I said, well, tell me about the system you're using. What is the system you're using to ring people up? And we talked about that. I said, are there ever problems with it? Yeah, there's problems all the time. Well, who fixes those problems? Well, I have to fix them because nobody else is there to fix them. And, so we kind of walked through and talked about the fact that she's actually troubleshooting a system as an end user. And so this question of, if I don't have any experience, look for those ways that are experience with IT. Tech is all around us. Look for those ways that are experience that you can kind of play up. And if you have some of those things that you can put on a resume that you can start to put together, once you have that plus a certification, we find that's a really great way to kind of break in. I do feel that A+ is kind of really that springboard into getting that first job, so to speak, in tech. A lot of people might want to go straight to Network Plus. One of the ways you can do this is we actually offer free trials, and I suspect that Infosec has some things that they do as well. But if you go to Infosec's website, you go to CompTIA's website, you can look and see, what are the questions like? What is the learning product like? Is this something I understand? And if you get it and you understand it, that can help you determine where you should kind of be on this pathway. And I'm actually going to skip ahead just a second here and go to this pathway slide. If I can hit the push to audience here on my laptop. We've got this career pathway, and we suggest, right, that you should start with A+, but it's never going to be a linear path. I see people going from A+ to Server Plus and becoming server admins and working in server rooms for 10 or 20 years. People get Security Plus, right? Many of you have Security Plus, and you want to get Network Plus because it's going to allow you to get that networking expertise that you might need to move up to those higher level cybersecurity certifications. So what I would recommend is, do a little bit of background research, really think to yourself, like, what skills do I have? And if you've got some of those skills already and you want to jump into Network Plus, if you are an advanced end user and you can troubleshoot and you understand what it's like to, I'm setting up a basically kind of like a Soho office at my house right now. And I go from modem to router to access point, and I have a DMZ set up for my IoT devices. If what I'm talking about makes sense to you and you can do that, A+ might be a little bit too easy. So definitely look at the kind of learning products that are available for you, and that'll be one way to determine, where you want to start on this pathway. So great question there. Let me see if I can make sure. Oh, I went too far back. Let me fast forward here. We can edit that out, right? No, I don't think we can. So the new Network Plus, why is it different? I talked a little bit about vendor-specific networking certifications. We really are, like I said, CompTIA is a non-for-profit, vendor-neutral, which means that we don't say that any one vendor is better than the other. Of course, we know that many people out there using networks are using, they're using Cisco, they're using America, they're using Palo Alto. We're going to look to those experts that are using those products and ask them, what is the foundational technology? And how do we ask questions and test that foundational technology? How do we teach that foundational technology? So when you, as a certified individual, are going from one job to another, you have the skills. I won't read through our marketing material for you here. You can see and you can get this on demand. But basically, this is why we think there's a value proposition for Network Plus. Now, why is networking important? If we think of kind of that career pathway, and we think of A+ as being troubleshooting or helping the end user, which is the laptop, the phone, right? And then we move to networking. Networking is the connection. It's what brings everything together. And you have to understand those connections in order to move to the next step, which is either creating those whole systems like the cloud or securing those systems. Because if you don't understand how they're brought together, how can you understand how to secure them? So we have some metrics here for these networking positions and the industries where you can go. And it's not just tech companies. You can be a Network Plus certified individual and work in medical, work in IT, work in finance and insurance. And we see these network job ads there, mostly tech services. But really, if you're looking for a job within this area, think about broadening the reach. You don't just want to go to the usual suspects like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, right? There's so many more options out there. And you can see a lot of these job postings on the left side of the screen here, where really there are some big employers out there using Network Plus. And we at CompTIA partner with these employers, and we have people on the inside there that we're working with and saying, what is it you need from a network engineer? And they tell us they have their technical experts help us write the exams, so they know when they're getting someone Network Plus certified that they're getting somebody who's able to deploy, secure, and troubleshoot these networks. And
I actually had a question about some of the job roles. Please. I think one of the questions that a lot of people have, and we might get into this more later when we talk about the actual exam objectives, but I think people are curious about sort of the day-to-day life of a network person. I know myself I am, like what are you actually doing? Obviously you plug in some routers, set some stuff up, you troubleshoot for a few people, but like, is that it? Is there other sort of core responsibilities? And then I guess the second thing I was wondering is it sort of the same if you work in, a technical service organization or a finance or, public admin? Like, is there a lot of variety within these types of roles as well?
These are great questions, Jeff. I almost wish we put some up before. You must have thought about them. Day to day, you're right. It's going to be a lot of putting together switches and making sure they work. Making sure that if something goes down, that you're able to fix it. So the Tier 1 help desk, we think of Tier 1 help desk a lot, right, as somebody sitting at the other side of a computer screen where a chatbot couldn't answer a question and they're trying to fix it. As you get to Network Plus and you move up to kind of Tier 2 or supervisory, what will be happening in these big organizations? Let's say take General Dynamics right there, right, or IBM, because they have a lot of job postings. You might be really kind of becoming an expert in a single thing at these bigger places. You might be the person who's tasked with monitoring networking logs and making sure that uptime is correct. And if uptime isn't good enough somewhere, figuring out why. And that could be tracing a cable back. Is there cable degradation? It could be finding that there wasn't load balancing properly done in a specific place. And you might become an expert in a very kind of specific area. If you're working for a small business, however, you as a Network Plus individual might be one of two IT people there. At CompTIA, we have about 300 employees, and we have an IT staff, and many people are surprised to hear this. We have an IT staff of about 6 people. And there's one person who's the networking expert, and he's also the cybersecurity expert. And he started out basically putting together networks for developing the exams for CompTIA, and then realized, hey, we need to make sure this stuff's secure because it's our IP. And he was tasked with doing that. And now he's a cybersecurity expert and the director of cybersecurity here. So, you really can work your way up from those specific specialized things you might be doing at a larger place, and also get a broader range at a small business. And that's one of the things that's great about at least I think the way that CompTIA makes certifications is we really take into account, we're not just making this for enterprise. We're making it for enterprise, we're making it for academia, and we're also making it for those small business owners who really need those individuals to be able to kind of be a jack of all trades. So quickly here to the value of IT certification, then I'll move on to the meat and potatoes or bread and butter, whatever food metaphor we want to use. Maybe too early for those metaphors. We'll move on to the coffee with cream part of the webinar here. You all probably realize that IT certifications are valuable. I see them as twofold. Kind of on the entry level, getting your foot in the door. It's a way to set you apart. Right now, there's such a hiring crunch. There's such a skills gap. And IT certifications are going to really ensure not only are you seen, but you're really the person who's set apart for the job. And then, money. We have studies that show that certified individuals make more money than non-certified individuals. And, if salary is important to you, which I suspect it's probably important to most everybody on this webinar today, that's definitely one of the values of IT certification. It pays off in the long run. I think that we discussed the pathway pretty well. If there's questions about it later, we can come back. But I do want to dive into the actual objectives here. I'm not going to talk about the competitive comparison between CCNA and Network Plus. I don't know if we have enough time to really cover it. But just to say that the difference is, because one of the questions we get often is, why would I take Network Plus instead of like CCNA, for example? If you know you're going to go work at a Cisco shop, CCNA is great. It's a very specified Cisco-centric certification, and it'll get you a job working at a Cisco shop. I'm not going to pretend like, Network Plus is the best thing all the time. But if you want to advance your career, if you want to have a broader range of possibilities, that's where we see the value proposition for Network Plus. So what you're all here for, I suspect, is, what's on Network Plus? How has it changed? What's different? Why should I take Network Plus? Maybe a little key into, like I said, I help work on the development. I'm not going to tell you what the questions and answers are, but maybe some of the things that you should be expecting and you should be looking for a little more closely as you think about this certification. So on the exam, the major areas, and these are the areas that are going to be most likely to show up on the certification, are IP addressing and connecting networks. This is just basic stuff that you'll want to be able to do if you're going to take Network Plus. Know your wireless standards and technologies. Know what the differences are. Know when you might use a Cat 5e cable, know when you want to use a Cat 8 cable. Full disclosure, I don't run Cat 8 at my house. I don't think there's any use for it yet. But there are some enterprise reasons where this might be used. So know also what those wireless standards are. Know what the 802.11 standards are and the differences between them. And then network availability. I think most of us, I'm not included. I'm actually in the office here. I can't say I've got a nice, beautiful, old school clock like that in my home. But I suspect many of you are probably at home right now. Maybe you're in a coffee shop. Maybe you're on your phone, sitting outside in your car or something. But network availability is so important, not just in the office, but at home. And we have realized that, and we have taken this new refresh to understand that this work from home shift really is a shift, that we're probably not going back to a typical 9 to 5, and Network Plus certified individuals need to understand how to make sure the network is available on-premise and off-premise. And then securing and hardening networks. I saw many of you had your Security Plus already, and perhaps you're finding out that, hey, as I'm going to, want to advance in my career, I need to really understand how I secure and harden these networks, specifically based on IP addressing schemes, or specifically based on the way that a series of subnets work, or specifically based on, the reservations I might be taking in a DMZ. And you found that having that technical skill that Network Plus gives is what's going to help you advance. We see so many people go from Security Plus to Network Plus. Even though we say it's, the different direction, we really see Network Plus as being used to expand one's career. And then troubleshooting. I like to say that everything in tech is just different versions of troubleshooting. Sure, there's often a time where we might be able to set up a network from scratch. Like I said, I'm renovating my house right now, and all the walls are torn out, which means I get to rerun everything from, from the floorboards to the access point. But regardless, it's not just simple A to B runs. I have to think of where are things going to be placed so that I can have the APs properly cover, but not be on the wrong channels and miscommunicate. That it's kind of like a type of troubleshooting. And of course, stuff is going to go wrong. In your day-to-day, if stuff isn't going wrong, maybe you're not looking closely enough, or maybe you've got a network that's set up so perfectly. But at the end of the day, it seems like so often we're just troubleshooting and trying to put out that fire. And we have a full domain on troubleshooting to make sure that you know that these common networking issues that come up, you're able to know what they are and troubleshoot them as we move along. All right. So, high-level updates to the domains. Network architecture appears for the first time, and we've included this because cloud is becoming so prevalent and popular. Even if you're not moving on the security path, or you are on the security path and you want to be involved in cloud, whether it's like SecOps, SysOps, DevSecOps, whatever kind of area that might be, you need to understand network architecture. And we've included that now, including software-defined networking, which is really one of those cutting-edge pieces that's started to become less cutting-edge, less emerging tech, and more just everyday tech. So we have added this to make sure that these network integrations and the architecture around them is fully understood. It's really going to help you advance your career to the next step to understand these things and be able to discuss the common language of networking. Emerging wireless standards and tech has been included more so, and this is really to allow flexibility for your deployments when you're deploying networks. What are the wireless standards and technologies that you're going to want to use, so you kind of have a full quiver, so to speak, of them to choose from. SaaS applications, the third kind of thing here, and this is all has to do with the work from home movement, and then network performance monitoring and high availability. These are separate objectives. They're going to be covered in depth because it's extremely important to have a network that's working, that has the right low amount of latency, that doesn't have network jitter, that has high availability, and these are being covered so that you can understand them at the objective level. And then security. We understand that Security Plus is its own certification, and we don't want the Security Plus stuff to be bleeding over into the other certifications. But there's going to be security on every certification because, it's a security-first mindset, right? So what we've done is we've streamlined the security to focus on these critical aspects of hardening networks and executing deployments to make sure that there are not unintended data breaches. It's really important for these network administrators when they're setting up and helping set up networks to do it correctly, because we've seen data breaches I think I saw something the other day, like 95% of data breaches are due to the result of an internal error. And that's just staggering that we can protect against that, which really helps, protect your job, protect the business. So
yeah, I just wanted to jump in and remind everyone that they can ask questions. So feel free to drop any questions in the question panel, and we'll be sure to pass those along to Randall. But yeah, one thing that I wanted to ask you about was, it seems to me like the Network Plus is starting to cover more stuff. So I was wondering if you think it's harder now maybe than the previous version. And the reason I ask is because you brought up cloud, and now there's these hybrid environments, and there's just more devices everywhere. So it seems, based on that candidates would then have to know more in order to understand all those things and how they interact. So do you think it's more challenging now than the previous version, or not?
So I've agreed with you your first couple of questions. I'm going to have to disagree with you on this one. We've actually, and I did the math. I literally took both sets of objectives, put one on a screen and the other on a screen, and counted objectives, counted domains, counted sub-objectives, counted sub-bullets. This took me a solid couple of hours. There's 5 domains on each exam. Here, let me flip over to the domain screen here. I think it would be good to have this in the background. On the 007 certification, there's 29 objectives. There's only 25 on the 008. So we've streamlined it. We have looked at what is the critical things that you're going to need if you are working on networks in this way. And the sub-objectives as well, we've gone from 235 of these sub-bullets to 157. So really what we've done is we said, what's really important to know? We've added some stuff on there that's important. But the other important thing is deprecated technologies, we've taken them off. Things that we don't see being used, those have been removed. Stuff that is now kind of part of a plug and play, we only expect that you're going to need to know how to plug it in and let it play, not that you're going to have to really be able to replicate what is occurring there. And this will become a little more evident as I get into the next slides. But I think that's a really fair question, that we're not expecting individuals to be able to set up a cloud instance, like to be able to go into Azure or AWS and to set up the cloud. Just to know that, the cloud's out there and I might need to be networked to it in some way, but not that you're going to have to be able to operate within it. So it's a good question. I don't think it's more difficult. It's more appropriate for the world that we live in now. And we've really, I think this is the main thing we've done, looked at what are these emerging technologies that are being used and why do we need to know them? And what are those old technologies that are being replaced and we don't need to know those anymore? So let's get on to the objectives here. And I'm going to take a little bit of time to go through this. I'm not going to go like extremely in depth because you can, of course, download the objectives yourself. And I'd like to leave some time for Q&A at the end. And I know there's some things that Jeff would like to point out as well. We also want to know who the lucky winner is. I was told beforehand that as a presenter, I cannot be a winner for the year's worth of Infosec learning tools. But it sounds like that's a great thing for the lucky one who's gonna get that. But we'll take a few minutes here to go through the objectives. And this is kind of a mapping that we create. And I want to kind of walk through how this works with you. So if you come back to look at it, this is the second most important thing if you're looking at objectives. The most important thing is the actual objectives. You can get those objectives. I suspect they're linked to on Infosec's website. You can get them on our website at CompTIA.org if you go to our certifications and look for Network Plus. The objectives are your friend. The objectives are going to tell you what is on the exam and what you need to study for. Right here, I have a mapping for the old objectives to the new objectives. So the new ones are on that second column where it says new objectives, N10008 being that new certification exam, the new refresh, N10007 being the older version and the old objective. This is basically like if you were looking at the old objective and the new one, you're like, oh, I wonder what has changed, what is different. It'll show you like what the new stuff is. So if you're really kind of thinking, hey, I think I know my Network Plus stuff. I've started studying for it. I've started looking at it. I wonder which of the certifications is going to be right for me. This is where you'll want to go to say, okay, I'm more comfortable with the new objectives or the old objectives. And whichever one you're more comfortable with, they are both available through June 30th of next year, through the end of that academic year. So you can take whichever one is more appropriate for you. But if you're really interested in knowing the more cutting edge things, if you really have that desire and drive to advance your career, you'll see that a lot of the things included here are what is going to kind of give you that leg up in your career. So the comments are comments that we've worked with our subject matter experts and our product teams internally to determine what has been moved or changed. And then the mapping is just what's different about it. One thing I want to bring up is this cognitive level change. So this cognitive level, you can think about it as, is this something you need to know, like to be able to explain, or is it something you need to be able to do? If you look at those objectives, let's take 1.2 here, that second row. It says explain the characteristics of network topologies and network types. All you need to do here is be able to explain what are the different network types that might be used. What are network topologies? For example, what is a DMZ and when might I want to use it? You have to be able to explain that. This isn't asking you to be able to set up those network topologies and network types. So it's at a level where it's appropriate for the job role. It's appropriate for this individual that has that 1-2 years of experience. And where it says cognitive level change, as in 1.3 that's like the old 2.1, this is an instance where I think it's actually gotten easier, so to speak, where you don't have that kind of hands-on component. Whereas in the old certification, 2.1 was deploy appropriate cabling solutions, where you might have all these different types of cabling. But we're even seeing now, there's really cabling technicians. Cabling is becoming highly specialized for most of the job roles. So what we're asking here are, be able to tell us what the types of cables and connectors are and when you might use them. When are you going to use Cat6 cable, and what is the connector for that? Hint, RJ45 in most instances. And when you use coax, what's the right type of connector? When would you do that? And we're not saying like you actually have to be able to go do it, because really the expertise comes with knowing what it is, and then it's just plug and play, right? So we're better assessing that, and that's a cognitive level change, and one of the things that makes the exams different between each other. So, to go through these, I am not going to speak for the next few minutes of the new objectives and old objectives, but kind of give some medium level stuff here as into what's in the objectives. And what we're going to see in the first domain, which are these objectives here, are the OSI model, which is that layer 7 model. That's really kind of one of the important things to know. And then also I would like to highlight 1.4, which is this: given a scenario, configure a subnet and use appropriate IP addressing. This is extremely important. This is one of the most difficult things that candidates have a hard time with. It's because, subnetting, IP addressing, it's difficult. It's not easy. It requires some math. I was told there wasn't going to be math on this exam, so to speak. But we really do make sure that you have the technical hands-on skills to be able to deploy networks, and this is one of those key areas. And then I also can't stress enough 1.5, ports and protocols. I know it's memorization, I know it's rote and it's boring, but if I say 443, you say HTTPS, right? If I say 514, you say syslog. If I say 1443, you say SQL. Basically, you want to be able to just know what those are, to be able to spit those out, because when you're on the job, you're going to need to know what that port is, be able to open it, close it, be working from the CLI, be working in an ACL, and have it there at your fingertips, not having to look it up every time. Network implementations, another kind of key area here, and this is goes beyond that notion of the architecture and topologies towards the actual implementing of these networks. And so we ask in 2.1, some of the things that I would suggest are more important are: what are the networking devices you're going to be using? What's a layer 2 switch, a router, a hub, AP, bridge, LAN controller, a repeater. When do you use these things? When might you not want to use these things? And then we get into IoT and those other network devices that are really popular right now. I don't think there is a business or a newly networked home not using these devices. I'm in a room right now that's like a Zoom room, where we have an IoT device that hooks up to Zoom, that hooks up to the TV. And it's just prevalent everywhere. So know what the use cases are for those. One of the others that I like to look at here is 2.4, wireless standards. Really important to know what the 802.11 standards are, when they're appropriate, like NAC and AX, respectively Wi-Fi 4, 5, and 6. What 2.4 and 5 gigahertz frequencies are useful for. 2.4 going to have broader reach, not as fast. 5 is going to have less reach, but it's going to be faster. When you're going to set this up, how to use directional antennas, for example, types of encryption. And this is one of those hands-on scenarios. You're going to want to be able to configure wireless standards, because you walk into any business nowadays, you need to have wireless that works, because people like me right now are going to be sitting using not hardwired, and wireless really is becoming as important, and everybody expects it to be as fast as their wired connections. Moving on to 3 here, operations. And by operations, we kind of mean the logging, the uptime, the automation, the network moving smoothly and being there after it's been deployed. So 3.1 is one of the places where we've started to see this role, this junior network administrator, this system administrator, really be more involved in network availability. And this is kind of one of those lead-ins to security, right? Because if you are working in security, or you're working towards cybersecurity, the metrics, being able to look at device logs and logs, doing log reviews, audits, syslogging, traffic review, sensors, uptime and downtime, that's something that when you are a security engineer, you're going to be looking at this like, hey, there's an awful lot of traffic going across this part of the network that we usually don't see it, what's going on. And that's kind of one of those keys in where you're going to start to learn those things about security that networking lays the foundation for. We have also, I think, important here, and this is that new objective I talked about, 3.3, high availability and disaster recovery. We've seen it. Stuff goes wrong. Things hit the fan, and as even a junior member of an organization, you want to know when something goes wrong, what am I supposed to do? And a lot of times you're not always just going to be saying, hey, boss's boss, something's wrong. You want to be able to say, hey, I saw something's wrong or I heard something's wrong. Here's specifically where it has gone wrong. I don't have the admin credentials to work on this, but I think this is where you need to go. And so we're really showing that response to disaster and the solutions to make sure when something goes wrong is fixed goes up and down the chain. Next, on network security, like I said here, we've really streamlined the objectives here. You'll see that the 5 objectives, the mapping on the right, shows that we've updated the content, and that's where we've streamlined it. Some of the old deprecated technologies are now gone, and we've added content really only in one of the areas in 4.3 here. Some of the things that might be the most important here to know are going to be those authentication methods like MFA, SSO, TACACS, Radius, for example. Also, you're going to see in 4.2 compare and contrast attack types. So know what some of the attacks are, know what IP spoofing is, right? Know what ransomware is, know what social engineering is. Not necessarily be able to mitigate against it. That's kind of more what we're going to be seeing with Security Plus. But know what it is. So if you see something, that you think might be a DDoS attack coming across the network, you can say, hey, I think I know what this is. I can quickly work this up the chain, and that's where security is so important with this kind of security first mindset that we're seeing across the board. And then, as I promised, troubleshooting. CompTIA has taken an approach that most job roles involve troubleshooting, and that is going to be reflected in a good percent of the objectives, somewhere between 15 and 25% of the objective domain coverage. And we see it here with Network Plus as well, where you're hands-on, you're at that implementation level, things are going to go wrong quite often. The troubleshooting methodology is on there. Not as important to know, kind of if you know this once you know it across the certifications. But what we really do show here is that there are going to be problems with cabling. Know the tools to fix it. Know when if you're looking at LED status indicators, what does it mean if something's blinking white? What does it mean if something's blinking amber? What does it mean if something's blinking red? How am I going to know if this router isn't working? How am I going to know if an AP is broken? Basically, be able to understand what are those cues you would use to troubleshoot. As well, we have that kind of hands-on software component where you're going to be using things like a Wi-Fi analyzer. You might be using a bandwidth tester, and then you're going to get into the CLI, right? You're going to be on a command line, and this isn't. We're not saying you're going to be in Nmap here, right? Really looking at diagnostic codes, but you're probably going to be opening up a Windows command line and pinging things. You're probably going to be doing trace routes, and you might be using hostname telnet and some of those key ones that we have there under 5.3. And finally, like I said, wireless connectivity, so important. 5.4, troubleshooting common wireless connectivity issues. I have heard so many times, I can't get a good Wi-Fi signal. I can't take this meeting. We are going to make sure that you as a Network Plus certified individual are able to figure out what these problems are and to solve them hands-on from the, from the implementation of the network to understanding what the network is to troubleshooting. So I hope that's given a pretty decent, kind of high and mid-level. Of course, reach out to us, reach out to CompTIA, reach out to Infosec, or reach out to Jeff through the questions here, and if you've got any other questions, we're happy to answer them. But I think I am going to hand it over to let you know, now that you've heard what Network Plus is and you want to get Network Plus certified, how do you do it? And I think that's you, Jeff.
Yeah, great. Thanks for that. This will just take a minute or so to cover some of your training options, and then we'll spend the last few minutes here answering some of the questions that I see have come in. So if you have any on your mind, feel free to drop them in there. We'll get to them in it shortly. Just wanted to elaborate a little bit on different ways you can train for these certifications. One of the great ways, and one of the things we're giving away today, is an Infosec Skills subscription. And what I really love about Infosec Skills is you get access to everything. So we have some questions coming in like, should I take A+, should I take Network Plus, am I ready, that Randall talked about. And the great thing with Infosec Skills is you can start taking the Network Plus training. You can start looking at some of the practice exam questions, and then you might realize, hey, I should take A+, or like, where should you fit there? So it's because you get access to all 130 plus role-based learning paths, certification training. We also have this sort of like skills focused stuff like incident response, ethical hacking, things like that. And then we have these really cool cloud-hosted cyber ranges. So, we have a Security Plus cyber range. You can go in and actually, put some of those skills, into action and really test yourself with that hands-on stuff. So, great thing there. You can create an account for free. And then if you want to keep using it, it's only $34 a month, or $299 for a whole year, and you get unlimited access to all that stuff. Boot camps, those, it's kind of the bread and butter of InfoSec. That's what, we've sort of built our reputation on over the past, 15 years. That's great if you know exactly what you want. If you know 100%, I want to get the Network Plus, we have this really, intense, multi-day training that you can go to with live instruction and, really build those skills, with an expert by your side. So kind of two different ways there, depending on what you're looking for and how committed you are there. But I did want to announce our winner for the Infosec Skills subscription, and that is Chase M from ClearCom. So we will be sending you an email probably today or tomorrow with a coupon code that you can use to get access for a full year to all that good stuff. And then the last thing you mentioned about our live boot camp is our exam pass guarantee. One of the things that people really like, they're kind of nervous about taking a test. So we have an exam pass guarantee, which basically means if you're to take your Network Plus exam or any other of these CompTIA exams and fail on your first attempt, we'll pay for you to, have a second attempt, on us, because, we believe that our instructors and our training should be able to get you there. So with that, we can go ahead and jump into some of the questions you have. Kind of going off that exam pass guarantee, one question is, like, what are the Network Plus exam pass rates? Do you have any insight into that, like off the top of your head, like how many people tend to fail on the first attempt and how many people pass?
I do have insight to that. I unfortunately don't share that information at the behest of our chief legal officer. What I will say is if you have the appropriate experience and training, we find that people do pass Network Plus. It's not necessarily easy, but I don't think it's particularly difficult. One thing that CompTIA certifications do really well is they assess your ability to do the job, which is why when you have it, people are eager and excited to hire you. So we do have to make it difficult enough, right, to weed out individuals that don't have the skills. But if you have the skills and you have the certification, it's really a great path. And I love that Infosec, stands behind their training. There are so few training organizations that say, you know what, we're going to train you and we're so confident you're going to pass that we'll pay for your retake. So I just wanted to give a thumbs up to that. I really love seeing that.
Then we have a couple of questions that have come in sort of about the certification path and some of these entry-level certs here. So Deanna's asking if she has her A+, should she get the Security Plus before Network Plus? Is there any case where you kind of recommend that?
I think, and so I'm going to go to that slide here. It's the second sentence there. It says, enter where appropriate for you. If you are interested in kind of a more traditional path where you're going to get Network Plus and then Security Plus, that trifecta, we see that those three will open up doors going into cloud, going into infrastructure, going into cybersecurity. That's really going to give you the broadest potential path to get any number of jobs. So for that reason, I would recommend, if you have your A+, going Network Plus next. They really build on each other, and then going to Security Plus. If you're certain you want to do cybersecurity, and you don't think that cloud is going to keep growing like it does, you think security is the place to be, perhaps you have more security expertise with what you've been doing as an A+ certified individual. Maybe you've found that the tickets you've been working on and that you're really getting into, the security space, and you understand that more, there's no reason not to go to Security Plus. It's really what's most appropriate for you. But I think for the broadest possible chance to really expand and have many opportunities, I'd say that we have these core skills for a reason, because it's A+ is the end user. Network Plus is putting up the networks, and what do you need to understand? You need to understand the end user. Security Plus is hardening networks. What do you need to understand? You need to understand the network. There's a reason we've created the pathway this way, and it kind of flows in that direction.
Yeah, and you spoke a little bit earlier about Security Plus and some of the Network Plus security domain. I believe like 20%, or I think it's 19% of the exam covers security. So Bogdan, he's asking here, do you see a point in the future where Security Plus and Network Plus is kind of molded together, because security seems to kind of be moving up the food chain, so to speak?
I don't think I see a point where those become a single certification exam. I do think that we'll continue to assess and reassess the type of security coverage that's on all the certifications. And we do that because we don't want Security Plus to become too big and massive that it's not something you can just understand with one program. So as the cybersecurity engineer, that kind of Security Plus role becomes more specialized, there are going to be parts of Security Plus that'll work its way onto other certifications. Then there might be parts of certifications that they'll work their way onto Security Plus. And that's part of this refresh. It's, the whole reason that we're talking about what's the new Network Plus. So I think we'll see maybe changes between the two, but not molding together.
Yeah, we have two more questions here, and then we'll wrap up. Gordon's asking, does the troubleshooting section cover any SDN issues?
I would have to brush up a little more closely. My gut response is no. That SDN is covered at kind of an understanding level, not to have to troubleshoot it. With software-defined networking being a kind of one of the newer technologies in the networking space, the junior network engineer, so to speak, whoever has Network Plus, would be expected to know what it is, how it works, but not to troubleshoot it if something had gone wrong.
All right, and then the last question we'll end on here is from Andre. Wants to know, now that folks can take the exams online, is it recommended that Network Plus be taken in person? And just for myself, is kind of plan on always offering remote testing? Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, a fantastic question. The exams are offered through Pearson's OnView, which is their online system. So you can take the certification exams online. You can also go into a testing center that you can find through the Pearson View testing center. So you go to Pearson's website, just like you would to sign in for any of the certifications. CompTIA is actually going to be offering an additional way to test through our own CompTIA sign-in, but that'll be coming a bit in the future. For now, you can take it either in person or online. When you take it in person, you're really just taking it online through a computer somewhere else. Personally, I would go into the testing center if I was sure that the center was safe from a health standpoint. And I know what Pearson's been doing with their testing centers is they've been social distancing, they've been spacing out bookings, and I've seen a couple of testing centers recently, very kind of sparsely populated. I like to be there because it gets me in the mindset of taking the certification. I have the pencil and paper they give me. I'm sitting down, it's quiet, there's no distractions. But I understand it's not is easy for everybody else to get to a testing center sometimes. So if you want to take it online, you can. So both options are available for you. The pricing is the same, and the experience is very similar. In the exam, I want to be clear about this. The exam you take is 100% the same. You're not going to get a different exam between the online or the in-person offerings.
All right, and with that, we are out of time. So I want to thank everyone for joining us today and give a big thank you to Randall for sharing his expertise. Definitely learned a lot myself. Lastly, if you have any questions about Network Plus or any other training, please reach out to myself or Infosec. We'd be happy to answer your questions. So thanks again, and have a great day, everybody.